Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our meeting of Planning and Healthier, Stronger Community Policy Advisory Committee on the, was it the 2nd of October? Right. I am Councillor Sarah Barwick, the chair of what I've already said, the PHS committee. And I'm pleased to welcome you to this meeting. I really should read this before I start. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded for backplay on the councillor's YouTube channel. Will anyone else be recording the proceedings? Good. I ask so that the people at the meeting will know if this will be happening. Right, if the fire alarm sounds during the meeting, please remain seated and members of the Democratic Service team will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building. There has been a change to the running order. It will now be taken as following: item 12, then item 10, and then we go back to the agenda, so then it will be 11, 13 and 14. Right, are there any apologies?
I've got apologies for Councillor Keeley. Councillor Spooner will be joining us. He's just going to be a little bit late. Apologies, he hasn't been very well, so he's missed a couple of committees. He's got a bad shoulder, but Councillor Parfitt's going to sub for him, so yeah, apologies for Councillor Spooner.
I don't know if it was just the pack I've got, but mine finishes at page 533, which is halfway through one of the items on the Staplehurst Conservation Area. I came across that today. Yeah, the very last page. So it's sort of page 38 of the document, but the document continues for about another number of pages, and it wasn't attached to the papers I received. I don't know whether it's just this part, right? Yeah, so for some reason it looks like they weren't fully attached.
I've got pages in here, 531, 532 and 533, 38. And
if you look on the agenda, it actually goes up to page 579. So we're missing, I mean, I went online to see what it was, but it wasn't with the papers which were circulated.
we're investigating. Well, I'm not.
What you probably need to do, Chair, is agree it as an urgent update, because it's only a continuation of an appendix to the papers.
Right, apparently the papers are online, and I've only just seen them today because I didn't get paper copies. So, does everyone have access to the online copies, even though you've got paper copies in front of you, or do you want the paper copies sent to you on those?
I say I looked at it online earlier today, but I don't know about anybody else, whether they would have seen what's in them.
We're still investigating. I know you haven't got the paper copies, but was everyone able to view it online? Yeah. I'm not getting a no. But we will investigate that outside the meeting, and if someone does want the paper copy of those missing pages, please let Cassie know that you require those extra papers.
No, thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks.
Chair, just for the avoidance of doubt, I would like to speak briefly on item 10, which is not my direct business, so I think that possibly qualifies me as a visiting member.
Right, item 5. Are there any disclosures by members or officers? No, thank you for that. Item 6, are there any disclosures of lobbying?
Items 10 and 11.
Thank you. I move that all items to be taken in public. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 8, right. Are there any comments regarding the accuracy of the minutes? Thank you. I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of September 2024 be approved as a correct record and signed. Is that agreed? Thank you. Is there any comments from the Democratic Service Officers? No, that's what it says there.
Oh, it's there are any comments, consult.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, it's my dyslexia kicking in. Right. Item 9, are there any comments on the forward plan, or do the Cabinet members wish to make any comments?
Thank you, Chair. The if we remember back to our meeting on the 9th of July, we had a report coming up called Maidstone Local Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan, which went out to consultation during August. And I was looking on, I've got the paper here, and it was the reason for going out in August was because we had to bring it back with the response from the consultation for approval in the autumn. Now, obviously, our next meeting after tonight is going to be in November, which you could stretch out to say that's autumn, but I just want, and it's not, and I notice it's not actually on the list of items going forward. So I just wondered actually when it is coming back to us, because I say we agreed to go out to consultation during the school holidays on the basis that it needed a relatively quick turnaround, and it's not on the agenda tonight. And as I say, it's not on the forward plan.
Any officers wish to comment on that?
Sorry, Tom Gilbert from the planning policy team. We are just finalising the feedback that we've had in, and so we are hoping to bring it to the November meeting on that one. It just wasn't quite finished because we had more feedback than we were expecting, which is a positive thing.
Thank you, Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a couple of bits, really. Could we clear off some of the items that are passed? Because we're at forward plan, but it's getting quite big, which is good, because it means we've got lots to do and we're doing lots, but we've still got quite a lot of items on here from September. So if we could clear off all the done ones when we get our next forward plan for the next meeting, that would be great. And then I was just going to comment that I was pleased to see that we're opening still bidding round 2 to get some infrastructure for our communities across the borough. That's great, and that's coming in November, so look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll be able to do that.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's just in terms of the LC whip, the cycle. If Democratic Services could make sure that is on the forward plan, I'm not quite sure how it's fallen off, but it should be on there for November. Thank you.
Thank you all for the I move the forward plan be noted. Thank you. Moving to the change of agenda item, so we're going to item 12. And that is lead officer Marion, who's on Teams, I believe.
Yes, you able to hear me okay?
We do, thank you.
Okay. Right, yes, this item is regarding public rights of way, and it's a recommended that we have the cabinet member make the final decision on this issue. Currently, public rights of way diversions and extinguishments can be either the Highways Act 1980 or the Town and Country Planning Act 1990. The former are all dealt with by Kent County Council. The latter ones related to planning applications are dealt with by Maidstone Borough Council, but it's only very specific circumstances where a diversion is needed to allow the build out of a planning permission. The legislative changes in the report have no bearing on those powers that we currently hold. The new legislation under the Highways Act will focus on public rights of way that cross private land, such examples being if they cross farmyards or industrial estates or potentially through a private residential garden. It's not relevant to the public rights of way that cross fields or through woodlands or across open land. It's focused only on these private areas of land that currently may have a public right of way across them. The new legislation will fast track these types of applications. There'll be a 4-month determination period. This power has not been clarified in the legislation, so whether it's dealt with by a district council or the county council. So if the legislation were to come in, potentially people could make applications to Maidstone Borough Council for these new types of diversions. What we're recommending is that we delegate that authority to Kent County Council so that they will do that work on our behalf. The reasons for this are Kent County Council have experience and resources in their current work on the Highways Act 1980. KCC has resolved to accept any delegation requests by the districts, and it's understood that all districts in Kent do intend to delegate this authority to KCC. So therefore, there'll be economies of scale, consistency administration, were we to go along this route as recommended. The delegation will be under the Section 102 of the Local Government Act 1972, and that delegation can be revoked. If we find there's a problem with this new regime, then we can reverse that decision if need be. It's not necessarily a one-way decision only. When these new applications go to KCC, they will be obliged to consult Maidstone Borough Council and also be obliged to consult parish councils. That's set out within the legislation. Any unresolved objections would be heard by the Secretary of State in an appeal format. So KCC would not necessarily have the final say. Anything that was raised a concern by the district, by Maidstone Borough Council or a parish council would have an appeal process resolving from that. At MBC currently, when we get applications to divert, extinguish or create new public rights of way, they do go on a weekly list of applications. So in that way, ward members would be aware of these applications coming to us, and they could contact the case officer and discuss any concerns they wish to have forwarded on their behalf. So in conclusion, the recommendation is to allow this delegation to KCC. And as I said, this would be a cabinet member decision. That's our recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that report. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to propose the papers. It seems eminently sensible that we delegate, given the information that's been given to us by officers.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. I'm a bit concerned about this. I think the experience of anything to do with Kent County Council and highways or cycling and walking is rather skewed in their attitude towards trying to promote movement space for vehicles. I mean, you only have to look at what they've done over the last decade or so to sort of see that. So I suppose I've got a question to the officers before I really come to a view as to whether we're looking at the administration in terms of staffing and the decision making remains with Maidstone through the planning committee, or whether we're looking at delegating the final decision making on an application. Because I think depending on that is whether I could support this or not.
Yes, the situation is we would delegate the administration and the decision of these types of applications to KCC. Just going back to the cases that this legislation is focused on, it's where you have a public right of way currently that crosses private land. So you could potentially walking across a field, a public right of way, and then you might suddenly end up in the middle of a farmyard, and then you go through the other side and you're back onto the open fields again or through woodlands. So this legislation is purely to do that very small section to be diverted. So you go around the edges of the farmyard, the edges of the industrial estate, or the edges of someone's garden rather than right through it. So they would be quite small lengths, and I don't really see that they'd necessarily introduce cars or vehicles into a route that currently couldn't use that for that purpose. Does that give any sort of clarification?
Thank you. Councillor Russell.
Oh, hi, thank you. I think this is very sensible. I'm happy to second Councillor Clark's proposal. As I understand it, KCC hold the definitive map anyway, so otherwise it will seem like we'll just be ping-ponging because someone will want to do a little change and then we would need to go to KCC to check the definitive map to come back again. So I think for these small diversions, I think this is quite sensible, so I'm happy to second.
Councillor Harwood, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I wanted to come in, Chairman, to reassure Councillor Harper that the Public Rights of Way and Access team within Kent County Council are not a part of Kent Highways, and that administrative work that will go on is entirely separate from any highway planning work. And I do not think there is ever a kind of beauty contest between this proposed change. It is brought about by national government, and it is basically just making a current kind of sharing across different levels of local government work better.
Thank you. We have a proposal. We have a proposer and a seconder. So are we all in favour of the recommendation? Thank you. Moving back on the agenda to item 10. So can I have Helen Smith?
If I quickly introduce and bring Helen in, the report runs from pages 21 to 32 on your papers, and it sets out 3 available options on pages 29 and 30. And Helen can talk about the detail, but essentially the purpose of the report is simply to introduce the second stage of the Gypsy for Travel and Travelling Show People Development Plan document, DPD, to undertake a 6-week public consultation. I think it's worth stating that this phase of the consultation does not identify any sites. So it is overarching policy and the generic policies that relate. In terms of the report that's before you, I think there's a really interesting reference at paragraph 2.7, where it points out that there are currently 71,200 settled households in Maidstone Borough, and there are only 576 Gypsy and Traveller households. So it's a very, very small number in the great scheme of things. However, culturally, it's a very important minority within the borough. And I mean, for those who are on planning committee, there are a number of policy issues where we do need to understand better how planning conditions and so on can work. And I think this DPD goes some way to supporting planning management decision making. From my perspective and reading through the document, I think there are a number of areas where I think Helen's going to introduce, but where perhaps kind of members may have a view as well too. One of those, which I know is a big issue for colleagues down in Headcorn and at Ulcombe, is the whole issue around public sites. That there is no kind of affordable pitches policy really here. The document is relying upon rural exception sites, and I think that is something that potentially is worthy of discussion as to whether that is a strong enough route to enable affordable pitches. I think there is also within the document, there is quite a reliance in terms of their forecast for the number of new pitches required upon organic growth within existing sites. and I'm not entirely convinced that that is what's going to happen. I think there will be new sites. We've got to almost double the number within the plan period. So I think we cannot rely, I think, upon organic growth, nor in some ways is that potentially desirable because of kind of over concentration and intensification issues, lots more hard standing and so on, which could be problematic. And then there are some other kind of issues which are not directly linked to accommodation, but do have a bearing on a lot of our decision making. I mean, for example, the relationship of paddocks for horses and ponies to sites where, of course, equine uses are not agricultural use classes, and therefore sometimes can be a conflict with use class. And I wonder whether we need more clarity within the document within that area. However, perhaps I'll hand you over to Helen, and then she can give you chapter and verse on the document which is before you.
Thank you,
Thank
Councillor
you.
Harwood. Good evening, everyone. Just checking everyone can hear me as well. Yep, brilliant. I think, well, Councillor Harwood, really this report is just to introduce this second stage, its preferred approaches of the Gypsy and Travelling Show People development plan document. And ultimately, we're seeking recommendation just to undertake a 6-week public consultation on the content of the document, hopefully to start by the 31st of October. And really, the report explains sort of the importance of the DPD, why it's needed, why we're producing it. It also, within the report, we summarise the feedback from our previous consultation, the Regulation 18A consultation, which took place in early 2023. And it also highlights the outcomes of the sustainability appraisal scoping report and the call for sites exercise that we ran concurrent to the previous consultation. The report also touches on the outcomes of our final Gypsy and Traveller Accommodation Assessment, sometimes abbreviated to GTAA, just in terms of what the identified accommodation needs are. So the overall need is for 529 pitches and 7 plots, and that's over the entire plan period, 2023 to 2040. In terms of what the report includes, in terms of the details about what's in the DPD, the content, it really is a sort of, it's setting the direction of travel. It's an emerging document. It doesn't contain our final policies. It contains our preferred approaches and the direction that we think we should take these policies in. It talks about our preferred spatial strategy and methods of meeting identified needs, as well as Councillor Harwood mentioned, identifying new public sites. It also includes development management policies as well to help ensure that the provision of sort of high quality, well-designed accommodation. Just sort of give a little bit more of a flavour, but without going too much into the detail of the whole document. It's the Council's preferred strategy to locate as much of the identified need as possible within suitable existing sites. Basically, we're trying to locate as much of that need directly from where that need is arising in the first place. We accept that it's unlikely that we'll be able to meet all of the needs through that process, but that would be our preferred strategy to start with. In terms of sort of meeting the identified needs, we would propose to use a combination of site allocations, some level of windfall development in suitable locations, and also sort of longer term, the exploration of garden communities and their ability to accommodate some sites in the longer term. Discussions may also need to be had with neighbouring authorities about their ability to help accommodate any needs that we can't meet within the borough, and that would those conversations would take place under the formal duty to cooperate process that exists for strategic planning. I think Councillor Harwood already mentioned the consultation document itself. It doesn't identify sites at this stage. There are no red lines on a map about where sites will be. And primarily that's because that decision is going to be influenced by the feedback on the preferred spatial strategy that's included in this consultation, as well as sort of outcomes of further evidence that we're undertaking, We've got specialist consultants undertaking a pitch deliverability assessment for us at the moment. And of course, we'll have wider stakeholder engagement. Alongside the actual consultation document itself, we'll be publishing the interim sustainability appraisal report for public consultation and feedback. And that is Appendix 6 of this report item. It was added as an urgent update the day after publication, but I believe it is in the agenda pack. Other documents that we plan to publish alongside the consultation document for sort of information, background information and supporting materials. We've got the Gypsy and Traveller accommodation assessment, which I've already mentioned. That was produced in September 2023, is already online at the moment. We also have an update letter from July 2024. Again, that is already on our website now. We'll be publishing the Sustainability Appraisal Scoping Report, which was from August last year. Habitats Regulations Assessment that goes alongside this Regulation 18B report, the Qualities Impact Assessment, and we'll also publish 2 topic papers, one relating to strategic policies and one relating to development management policies, which just sort of bring all of the different evidence base together and show how we are arriving at our emerging policy approaches. So if it's recommended tonight and agreed by the Cabinet member, as I said, the plan is to go out on public consultation for 6 weeks, starting the 31st of October, running through to, I think, the 12th of December, so that we can gain as much feedback as possible to refine the policies and decide on the appropriate sites to allocate and include that in our proposed submission plan, which would be hopefully expected March, April time next year. I think I'll stop talking now. If there are any specific questions, because I know it covers a lot of detailed points, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I've got a number of people waiting. I'll start with Councillor Parvitt.
Thank you for coming. It's Parfitt. Thank you for coming to me first. I just really wanted to ask, will the DPD be looking at the numbers and how they tie into the local plan? Because we have a numbers allocation on our local plan, and then if we have an additional requirement in the G&T population, they obviously have an impact on things like school places, hospital places, the road. And I think it's important that the two are integrated and we know what we're actually looking at. In other words, does that number come off our overall housing number, or is this in addition to? The second point I wanted to ask, because Councillor Harwood mentioned about affordable pitches, and I wondered whether there was a sort of, we look at 40% as a broad rule for our local plan. Are we going for the same sort of thing for this DPD, or do we do a needs assessment to see how many are needed? So those were my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harper.
Thanks, Chair. There was a lot of reading in this. There was a lot of very interesting information. But I'm just wondering, when we go out to this next stage of consultation, whether it's possible to possibly reduce the volume or to have a summary with it, because I kept reading the same statistics and I lost the track of how many times I read it, because there's a massive amount of repetition in these documents. And if we're wanting the public to be able to give us sort of sensible feedback, I think we need to try to take out, simplify it as much as we can do. And I think also when we are consulting, we need to particularly target clearly the Gypsy and Traveller communities to get their feedback, because they're key, obviously key critical. I noticed one other thing, and then I've got a couple of typos I mentioned. On page 42 of our agenda papers, or page 10 of the DPD, it says that in this January, a caravan count was done, and in the whole of the southeast, other than in Buckinghamshire, which is a whole county, Kent recorded the next largest number of caravans with 794, and then some of the size of Buckinghamshire only got 829. So I'm just wondering how it seems that, you know, we must be home to the largest population of gypsy and travellers probably in the southeast of England, if not in a wider area. And that just seemed to me a bit odd. But Maidstone, yes, you know, we have a lot. That seems to be so high compared to other areas. And then if I just come into my typos I spotted, which does prove I read it all, on page 104, there's a reference in paragraph 1.2.6 to having 3 local nature reserves. That's wrong. We approved about a year and a half ago another 2 or 3. So not sure what the total number is, but it's clearly more than 3. It must be more like 5, 6 or 7. So that needs to be changed. Then on page 117 in paragraph 2.2.4, it's saying that sales of new petrol and diesel cars will be banned in the UK by 2030. Well, that's now 2035, so that needs amending. And the last sort of typo I spotted was on page 154, where I don't know what's happened to the map, but the borough's been squashed up. Thank you.
Thank you. Would someone like to answer those questions before we got 2 more councillors wish to come in?
I can start. I've scribbled down, so hopefully I'll pick up most of the points. But if not, Karen is in the room today, so I'm sure she can pick up any that I miss. On the typos, I've noted them. I think they're both from the Sustainability Appraisal Scoping Report, which was produced back in August 2023. So it may be that at that time, I'm not sure when the nature areas were adopted. It might have been before that time. That might be why it references 3. And same with the other point was about the sale of petrol and diesel cars. Again, I'm not sure what the position was in August 2023 when the document was published. It might be that came after, but I will check with our consultants who produced that for us anyway. If I go back to the beginning, I think Councillor Parfitt Reid's questions about the population projections and how this document, the Gypsy Traveller DPD, ties in with our local plan review. Obviously, we look at population projections as a whole, but the local plan review will have a housing requirement in terms of conventional housing, bricks and mortar housing, and then the Gypsy and Traveller DPD will have an accommodation requirement in terms of pitches and plots. So they are 2 different requirement figures that we're working towards, but based on borough population projections as a whole. Affordable, you asked about affordable housing as well, or affordable accommodation, affordable sites. The Gypsy and Traveller accommodation assessment is done slightly differently to the way that conventional bricks and mortar housing assessments are undertaken for the local plan review, and we use the standard method calculation of how many homes we will need, and that is a national standard method that's applied. In terms of Gypsy and Traveller accommodation assessment, it's very much more localised, and our consultants opinion research services, ORS, they actually went out and conducted the assessment for us and did over 350 interviews with households currently in the borough. And the way that they determine the number of pitches and plots that are required is based on existing families in the borough. So in terms of getting that affordable number of pitches that are needed, it will be based on the interviews with the households who are currently on one of our 2 public sites in the borough. There isn't any sort of wider assessment of viability or affordability that's undertaken beyond that. Sorry, I'm just looking through my scribbles. There's a question about being able to sort of simplify or slim down the amount of materials. The consultation document itself is about 40 pages long, cover to cover, and there are, I think, 12 questions throughout that. I think it's a lot of the supporting material and the evidence that goes behind that, which we are required to produce to justify and demonstrate the content of the DPD. That's probably what takes up a lot of the agenda pack this evening. We are required to have that in terms of submitting our plan on a robust, sound evidence base that will be tested at examination. So it has to have a certain level of technicality to it. But as I say, I'll try welcome any feedback on trying to keep the actual consultation document, the DPD plan itself, slimmed down, or if it could read better, happy to take that feedback to make it more readable for the user. And then I think the final point I had noted down was about the caravan count data. Now that is something that we are required to do by central government twice a year, and it very much is a snapshot in time of the caravans that are there on that day when all of the local authorities across the country go out and undertake the caravan count. We do have the highest number of caravans within Kent and indeed the wider southeast. And that is because we have a larger resident population of gypsy travellers, travelling show people within the borough. That is what it is. As I say, it's only second to Buckinghamshire in terms of the most recent caravan count, and that is the situation as it stands in the borough.
Thank you for that. It's Councillor Russell first. You come back at the end, but Councillor Russell's next.
Thank you. Just a couple of points. On page 41, we can obviously see that we've got Marden and Yalding 125, Coxheath and Hunton 123, and then Headcorn with 114. From the boundary changes, Hunton is actually in my ward now, so you need to rejig of that table because that means that the largest population's in Marden and Yalding ward, but obviously that includes Hunton now. The other thing is, good luck with your timeline. That is very tight. On page 29, I mean, you've got your orange preferred approaches consultation. So that already, the one we've just literally agreed on the 4th of September, we're slipping already, because if that's going into December, that's a half orange needs to go on that one. Then we've got Christmas, where hopefully you won't be taking too much time off because you're going to have to analyse all of those consultation responses. And then we're going straight out to Reg 19 in February, which you did mention April. So I think that might already be one back on the yellow. And then we've got submission in June. I think this is extremely tight. I mean, we need to go to consultation, but we do need to have a little bit of reality that the scheme that we've got here is pretty tight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm struck that I serve in time on the planning committee. We're always punished because we don't have these policies. We will see a scheme come forward. We will think that it's not the best scheme possible. It may be that takes a refusal, and then when it goes to the government inspector at appeal, it will be approved because we just don't have a policy or we don't have an allocation, and this is something that falls back to a reliance on a windfall site. So I'm very keen to get it out. To be honest, I will be proposing that we just send this out to consultation. There's a lot of feedback that we can get from not just the Gypsy and Traveller community, but also the parishes. I hope that every parish is fully engaged with this. Going back to Buckinghamshire, they do have an SPD on Gypsy and Traveller sites. We've failed to come up with policy year after year after year, decades after decades. So maybe that's the reason why we don't have the best spread of Gypsy and Traveller sites, if that's a concern. But when it comes down to it, let's get it out, let's get some feedback, let's get a good policy in place so that when things come to planning, we can actually work with those schemes and make sure that we get the best outcomes. So yeah, I propose that we send this out to consultation as per the papers.
Thank you. Councillor Harper, you wanted to come back.
Yeah, it was around the issue of the count, because I noticed on that it says it's done twice a year in summer and winter. Is it the same dates at each half yearly count across the whole country? So the whole of England does a count, say in January 2024, and then presumably it would have been done in July 2024, in which case there may be some comparability between the areas. And I'm just thinking the date can be quite important. Only being from South London and from Merton, which was a neighbouring authority to Epsom and Ewell, I know from experience that around Derby Day, you probably find the highest concentration of gypsies and travellers in the whole of the UK will be in that part of South London and around Epsom. So, for instance, if the count had been done then, Maidstone would be much further down the league. I think in this type of mobile population, the dates when these counts are done can quite skew things. I suppose I'm just seeking assurance from the officer that when we look at previous counts over a longer period of time, we are using reasonable information and we're not going to end up developing a scheme for, if you like, the maximum number, but not the number of pitches that will be needed throughout the whole time.
Councillor Harwood.
Thank you. I just wanted to come back on something that Helen mentioned, because I'm a little bit concerned about hidden housing need within the Gypsy and Traveller community, because it seems that the rural exceptions number of affordable pitches we need is being calculated just from our two public sites at Water Lane and Stile Bridge, when actually there are, when we're calculating housing need for the settled community, we don't just ask people in social housing. There's all sorts of people for whatever reason who are in private housing, the younger generation, or they become old or something, and suddenly they have a housing need that occurs. And I just want to be absolutely certain that we are rigorous and exercise a kind of due diligence from an equalities perspective in understanding the housing need within the community. And that's something that certainly I'll be discussing with officers, kind of in the interim. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson, did you raise? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your indulgence. First of all, I would like to reinforce what's been said by other members already. It is of paramount importance, I'm sure we agree, that the DPD plan is done with and not to the Gypsy and Traveller community. And I would ask all to cooperate in enabling us to bring our most vigorous efforts and clarity on a best practice approach to ensuring that the consultation is done with and not to those who I think it's fair to say aren't active parts of consultations in other areas. Secondly, somewhat at a tangent to the intent of this document, and I hope that you'll bear with me, the Gypsy and Travelling Show People Development Plan document clearly is a major part of very important work and responsibility of officers and members. It is at the core of the demands on the representation and even the leadership in our communities for members, those members of the population who voted for us, that this is done well and indeed excellently. And the bar is very high to meet the equality, diversity and inclusion requirements. It's already been pointed out, paragraph 2.6 in the introductory comments show the particular pressures in the borough of Maidstone against the average G&T community density of about 1 across the UK. We apparently are approaching 6. As ward member for originally Detling and Thurnham, now Boxley Downs, a significant number of those people live there, and I have had the privilege and challenge of meeting many of them and their neighbours. So these are not theoretical remarks that I'm making. I note on pages 170 to 172 there is the unmentionable future of the evolution of the baseline, as it puts it in dry terms, without the DPD. However, I feel that it misses the human factor, and that is the purpose for my current remarks. I notice under the equality comments on pages 82 and 83 are three very sober paragraphs. It addresses the need of the DPD to eliminate discrimination, harassment, victimisation and any other conduct that is prohibited by or under the Equality Act 2010. This next paragraph talks about advancing equality, and the third paragraph aims at fostering good relationships between persons who share a relevant protected characteristic and persons who do not share it. And in the rubric to the right of that statement, it points out very straightforwardly that the settled population is not a protected group. That page then ends by talking about how the plan, we hope, will reduce evidenced tensions. Some of those were on view, Chair, in the Parish Council meeting that I spoke at yesterday in my ward. These tensions are indeed very much in evidence. I attempted to speak positively and optimistically about the potential for this consultation, and I was left in no uncertain terms that some parishioners do not share my optimism. I note that questions 1, 11 and 12 in the proposed consultation seem to me to give leeway that some may choose to share responses that will not be considered directly relevant to this consultation. Namely, do you agree with the proposed vision and objectives of the plan? Do you agree with the proposed approach to monitoring and review? And do you agree with the proposed monitoring indicators? I do not suggest that we change those in any way, shape or form. I think the questions are entirely sound. My plea, Chair, is that in offering these constructive observations, that we might aim, going above and beyond the requirements of this evening item, to achieve a DPD for gypsies, travellers, travelling show people, plus a wider attention to community welfare. I do not ask for any delay. I agree with Councillor Clark that we should get on with this as quickly as possible, and certainly by the set out timetable. But I would like to ask, and through you, Chair, to the whole Council, that best efforts can be arranged in wider leadership and responsibility by officers certainly, and by all members, without delay or diversion to this plan, but thinking in terms of the communication of this consultation, bringing the best human and relational efforts by all of us, members as well as officers in partnership, so that we focus on the long-term health of our community, so that we achieve an excellent DPD, best possible outcome, and find ways of paying attention to the things which I think it's reasonable to assume residents will place into this survey, that will be thought outside its administrative purview, and I would like those observations to not be lost, and for us to think about ways in which we can facilitate that sharing process that moves us towards community harmony rather than increasing any division. And I hope that my remarks are understood to be entirely constructive. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Yes, I did see a hand up. I thought.
Oh, my arm was nearly falling off then. Yeah, I mean, I do struggle a little bit because this is your document. You're the administration. You come here, present the document. This is what we want to do. We want to send it to consultation. Great. Send it to consultation. Everyone can put their views in. I presume that you guys have read it and this is what you want to send out. So I think we just need this to go to consultation. I'm happy to second Councillor Clark that it should go.
Right, thank you. Yes, you.
So just a query about the actual, the questionnaire. So on page 28, 2.37, it said responses obviously can be on the questionnaire by email or by letter. Obviously later on, we realised that 60% of the gypsy and traveller population have no formal qualifications. So how else will we receive responses from the community? Interviews or other ways of engaging? And also on the demographic data section of the questionnaire, I don't know whether this is normal on Maidstone Borough Council because I haven't noticed it before, but by ethnicity, we had white British mixed with Gypsy Traveller. Where I work and other places, obviously that's usually separated, so that we could identify by the respondents if any from the community have actually responded. Otherwise, they're going to be mixed in together. And final point was just about healthcare. Obviously, there was sort of mention of healthcare in there, but no sort of definite plans around healthcare. And then obviously later on, we've got the information about 4% of the population are carers caring for over 50 hours a week. That is really intensive caring. So the people that they're actually caring for really do need healthcare very close by, not that they're having to travel to. So I just want to highlight that. Obviously, I think that's a really important part of the plan, that they have access to healthcare that's easily accessible.
Thank you. Yeah, if you want to come in, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on a couple of the comments that have been made. First of all, Councillor Thompson talked about EDI a bit, and I think there's possibly some language in here we want to just reflect on as part of that. So I'm hoping that we'll do that. Councillor Russell talked about a timeline being tight, and we've got this. Hopefully, we'll go to cabinet. Certainly, we'll go to cabinet end of this month, and we can still get it out on the 31st of October, which meets that first yellow box, green box, whatever it was. And yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right that it's going to be very tight, but we've got a lot of work to do, so we're going to push it as hard as we can. And I just wanted to thank Councillor Greenan, I forgot your name there for a second. I've only known you for 30 years. Around the health stuff, because I was going to ask the committee, you know, does the health stuff come out strongly enough in your view? Because I think that is one of the key things within the community that is really quite a stark difference to the settled community. So I thank you for that comment.
Thank you. Well, we have a proposer and a seconder, so we'll go to the vote. Do we support the recommendations? Moving on to item 11, Councillor Haywood, yours again.
Thank you, Chairman. Essentially, we have got a consultation currently ongoing on Local Transport Plan 5. It seems like only the other day when we were consulted on Local Transport Plan 4, and with all the influence we have with that, I'm not holding my breath. However, the format is very much kind of tick boxes as you go through. It doesn't allow much space for nuance, and there's a lot of nuance involved in a lot of these responses, and also it's not entirely clear what some of the headings mean. I mean, when it talks about M20 Junction 7, does it also mean the Bearsted Road and the associated sections or not? And there's been almost a kind of difference of opinion between us trying to work out what the questions mean. However, officers have come up with a view on some of the key issues pertaining to the next kind of 10 years of development linked to the local plan, and have flagged those within the proposed response attached as an appendix to the report. I will bring officers in. I'll bring Tom in a minute just to talk about the issue, but there's a couple of things I think that do need perhaps referencing here. The proposal for an Eastern Thames crossing has been very much in the news in the last week or so, with a number of Essex and Kent local authorities writing to the Transport Minister setting out their concerns. And coming back to this kind of blunt object around a kind of tick, is it okay? I do currently think having a tick in that we support the Eastern Thames crossing is potentially an act of self-harm, because look at the Dartford crossing and everything that's around that, and then put that in Mid-Kent. I think we know why the scheme is being talked about. It's not to get people further to Eastern Essex. It's to open up areas for development. And Maidstone is well and truly within the ambit of that kind of growth agenda. And seeing as the pressure we're already under, as we all know, with the current calculation and the NPPF changes, I really do wonder whether we as a council should be kind of being a cheerleader for an Eastern Thames crossing. I suggest we should say no, not that it will make any difference, but again, I just think I can't see any benefit, but I can see a lot of disbenefit. Just kind of moving on through, I think there's some other issues. I know that it's been already, Councillor Harper has talked about the local cycling and walking strategy. We all know how difficult it is getting into the county town and out of it on foot or with a pushchair or with a pram or on a bike or anything. I mean, it's really interesting when it comes to, I mean, many of us have grown old waiting to cross junctions on the Bridge Gyratory and A20 just up the road from the schools and so on. And they just, the lights just don't seem to, they change when they want to change for the cars, and that's it. But if you press the button on Fairmeadow where you cross to the football ground, instantaneously it goes green and allows you across. So there is a kind of route for pedestrians as long as you're a football supporter, I think. Anyway, over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. Yeah, the report sets out our proposed responses in Appendix 1, and I'll just briefly run through some of the items in there. So the consultation dates are running from this July to October. And this is the second consultation on LTP5. There was a first consultation last year, which we sent a response to, and that is attached to Appendix 2 of the papers. Just a bit of context, the local transport plan is something that is required by the Transport Act 2000 of the county, in our KCC in this case is a local transport authority. If you look at section 3, this outlines the content. So within that, I won't go through it, but 3.4 outlines that the county has got 9 challenges it perceives it faces, and then to overcome those, it wants 10 outcomes. And then also it splits the document into 5 categories. So strategic network proposals, so these are the ones that the county is proposing to influence. So this is things like National Highways Network. The second one is local road network, so this is what it controls. And then it's talking about public and shared transport network proposals, walking and cycling, and then the borough proposals. This is outlined in the document in figure 2 for the borough proposals, and figure 1 outlines the other proposals as well. Within our response, so we have outlined a summary of our responses in section 4, and this all comes from a review of our adopted strategies and policies, such as the infrastructure delivery plan, the integrated transport strategy, and the local plan review, to come to a conclusion on those responses. And this is all then fed into Appendix 1 of the document. And then the recommendation is to approve, subject to tonight, Appendix 1. Thank you.
Thank you. A few councillors wish to ask questions. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I take on board the points made by the Cabinet member about these types of consultation. I do applaud the fact that we're adding Linton Crossroads improvements on let's say question 16A. It's something that I gave feedback on the last Joint Transport Board, that the sort of radius that's been put over Maidstone goes all the way to Linton Crossroads but just misses it. And given that that's something which we have an aspiration to improve, I feel that should be centrally raised. That's not actually in our integrated transport strategy, but one aspect which is in our integrated transport strategy, which I feel should be specifically written on this point after Linton Cross Roads, is the A229 corridor. It's one thing to say it's in this includes Maidstone's integrated transport strategy, but that's one of our absolute worst problems from Shields Crescent up to Linton Cross Roads. Is an absolute nightmare. We've got a plan of action, we've got SELAP funding, we've got still in section 106 and even section 278, but it's absolutely desperate. There's nothing apart from Armstrong Road that's been delivered, and we really do need to send a strong message about the A229 corridor to KCC, because otherwise it's just going to languish.
Thank you, Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Chair. This was quite an interesting read. And I know what Tony said in terms of the Lower Thames crossing. Perhaps that's something which we do need to give some further consideration to, in terms of if you think it could be a Trojan horse for further development in this side and the other side of the Thames, because I think we've got enough development to deal with. Rather than that, I think when you look at their challenges, and their first one, challenge one, is clearly they've stated that for a while that they can't maintain the current highway, and that people got to live with gradually deteriorating roads. But you know, they then come through and they say challenge 6 about the financial viability of public transport. Well, Kent County Council, to me, from what I can see, is our transport authority, doesn't exactly do a great deal to promote public transport. And I'm just wondering whether, for instance, there's an opportunity in here to reference some of the potential moves from the new government, which are looking to try to give councils more power over public transport, because we do need to reverse the decline of it. We need to get people out of cars, and Maidstone as a town is a classic place where you could have a good bus network to do that if we enhance some of our prime services. I agree with you in terms of the cycling and the lack of it. I go back to the document I think I mentioned when we met in July, which is part of our local plan, which has a sort of 40 points, which we did jointly with Kent County Council at that time. It would have been nice to have seen the bulk of those ideas assumed into this report, because you do feel that, you know, Kent County Council will agree something and then it never takes anything forward. So, and in terms of, you know, Councillor Clark pointed out a few things. The gyratory crossing for pedestrians is one of the bugbears myself and Kimmy and Donna will suffer again tonight when we go home from here, is trying to cross it, because it's just a nightmare. And actually, if Kent County Council could be bothered to do a count of pedestrians, they would find that somewhere between a third and half or more of the pedestrians go across not on the pedestrian phase. I suspect when we go home tonight, it's 50-50 that we won't either. That is just one of the most divisive things, getting across that from the other side of Mason. Stuart would know as well, into the town. And I'm wondering whether in the comments where we're asked to put extra stuff, we can reference that, because yes, they've done it for the road element, but I think for pedestrians and cyclists, and especially people with sort of disabilities in terms of movement, something really needs to be looked at. You know, I don't know what, you know, there must be lots of options, but I do think we should be flagging that up. Other than that, I pretty well support everything what's here, but it's, if you like, what's not here, which is, I think, probably more important.
Thank you, Councillor Conyard.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few very, very quick points from this one. I'd like to echo sentiments of Councillors Harwood and Harper about concerns of fully supporting the Lower Thames crossing. There are other issues at stake there. The rest perfectly happy with. Obviously, there are parts which Councillor Harper has raised, which would be great to see in there. An area that I'd also like to see in there is our support or stronger support for the return of international rail travel. And it seems absolutely ludicrous that I need to travel for an hour and 10 minutes in the wrong direction to travel a train line which runs less than a 25-minute walk from my own house. Okay, so it'd be great to get something in there to strengthen that up.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffries?
I was just going to come in really. We've heard a bit in the previous thing about sort of this policy vacuum. Well, and I wanted to come back on Councillor Harwood's points. I think we don't have a policy vacuum. We've got a policy that actually we're not really comfortable with. And I wanted to say we are going to be working on a new policy, an integrated sustainable transport strategy, which would have made this report look a little bit different, and I'm sure would not have mentioned the Lower Thames crossing, which will see huge amounts of ancient woodland disappearing and so forth. So I just wanted to give a bit of context. That was all. That we're sort of batting this off the old policy and wanting to do stuff a bit different, and it will happen soon.
Thank you. Anyone want to come back? Sorry, Councillor Russell.
It was just a quick question, thank you. On page 332, I'm not very good at quizzes, but what I do is I don't leave gaps, because you never know, you might get points. But we haven't answered the question about whether we agree with the proposals for the bus service improvement plan. So I didn't know if that was a yes, a partly or no, I don't know. But either way, do you reckon we should fill it in? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
It seems that we've got to make a response to KCC, and there are a number of issues which I don't think there's much disagreement in this room over. So I wonder whether we should propose that we do move forward with consultation, but we give delegated power to the Cabinet member to take on board the thoughts that have come out of this discussion to sharpen up this document, because ultimately we do have to make a response to KCC. And I would be happy, everything that's been said tonight, I would be happy if those points would be taken on board and shaped into the report that we send out.
Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the way that we do that is in the free text boxes. I think within the free text boxes, there's an opportunity to expand upon all of the issues and challenges that we face every day and our residents face every day. I also absolutely agree with Councillor Clark's point about the line they've drawn around urban Mason. It makes no sense, to cut out where Cornwallis is and Linton Crossroads and things when they're absolutely key to the functioning or otherwise of transport south of Maidstone. So yeah, I think we do. This is not, we treat this as an opportunity to actually provide some detail on the challenges that we currently face, and it may also be worthwhile on the point that's been raised by 3 or 4 of us around the Thames crossing point. It might be good that we do write as a borough to the Transport Minister, setting out those concerns that we do have around the kind of collateral impacts from additional growth, and also some of the challenges that we know come if you build it within a misty, low-lying floodplain going down to the Thames. I don't see, where we know there are going to be issues, particularly as we move into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. We have I
will accept that letter as an extension to the proposal.
Thank you. That's what I was just about to ask. So are we all in favour of that proposal? Thank you. Item 13, the Headcorn area appraisal and management plan and boundaries. Yeah, whatever. And again, that is you, Councillor Harwood.
Yeah, this is slightly different from the previous 2 reports I've introduced, in that the document will be signed off by cabinet rather than by the cabinet member. So like you will be potentially feeding in some issues, I'll be feeding in some issues to cabinet. I mean, the particular bugbear I think I've got for both Headcorn and Staplehurst is that we used to have in Maidstone in the old local 2000 local plan a kind of landscape policy for the Weald, which related to things like ponds and so on. We lost that when we went into the new local plan, and it made it more difficult at planning appeals and so on. So I think there's some real kind of detail we need to think about. But I hand over to officers to introduce. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Just to say that, just to clarify, the Headcorn Conservation Area appraisal and proposed extension is for the built environment, and from my aspect we can only cover that, unfortunately. But I believe Anna is picking that up, my line manager, for clarity, as a separate issue. So the first item I have is for the Headcorn Conservation Area appraisal and management plan and a small proposed boundary extension. This was written approximately about 2.5 years ago, has gone through public consultation and discussions with the parish council. Any amendments have been made and updated. It just slipped through the net when there was a change of conservation officers and a change of committees, so it hasn't formally been adopted yet. So the idea is to submit this to the committee for full adoption as part of its final process. And for the proposed boundary extension, there will be a small follow-on project that will mean we put notifications in the local paper and the London Gazette, inform Land Registry and inform the owners of the buildings within the boundary extension. Thank you.
Councillor Harper.
I'm happy to propose the committee agrees recommendations. I've got one question actually. On page 476, we're talking about Article 4 directions, which, as we all know, remove permitted development rights. But the map you show only covers, well, probably just under half of the buildings in the conservation area. So I suppose I was wondering, why don't we apply to this Article 4 to the whole of the conservation area?
When the original document was written, they looked at areas that are at risk within the conservation area. We've been in discussions within the team. Now we've got full member of an additional member. We are looking at reviewing all the Article 4s for all the conservation areas. That will be a separate piece of work, but that is going to be picked up in the next few months. We know that it's an important aspect.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any questions? Seconder? Yeah, thank you. Are we all in favour of the recommendations? Thank you.
I think it's as much the same.
This item is for the Staplehurst Conservation Area appraisal. Again, it's been written in the last 18 months. It has been out to public consultation with discussions with the parish council right from the beginning of the process. We are proposing for the document to go to committee to be approved, so it will be a part of the planning suite of documents, and we're also proposing the proposed extension to be approved, which will include Idene Manor and its former estate as to be an extension of the conservation area to protect both the historic parkland, part of the original Farmstead Farm group, and the wider gardens of the old manor, or manors, because there was 2 manor houses on that plot. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Harper.
Yeah, I'm happy to move this. Got one question on this because I actually did read all these papers. Now, in terms of the enlargement, we refer to the Iden Manor estate and the gatehouse to it, but it also refers to the cottages which were built for, I think, estate workers in the area known as the Quarter, if you look on the map on page 495. So I'm just wondering, because if the dotted line goes down the middle of the road, aren't those cottages on the other side of the road? Or I'm trying to, it's a while since I've driven down there and looked at every single building down there, but it just struck me as I'm wondering whether that dotted line is where it really needs to be if we're trying to get these estate worker cottages linked in with the rest of the Iden Manor estate.
Thank you. The boundary line will pick up the rear garden boundary line of those cottages and come back to the road. I should make sure that the map itself is clear. I know sometimes when it gets printed they do go a bit fuzzy, so.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
Thank you. I just wanted to come back on a point the Cabinet member made about the more sort of ecological aspects, which I know is not covered in this document, but it brought to mind the fact that in the community centre in Staplehurst, which is the old school, on the southern corner of that, there used to actually be quite a valued pond. There's elderly people in the village that would say, oh, when I was a child, we used to come along here and it was full of frogs. And then at some point, it just got filled in because it was almost an inconvenience to have a pond at that point. So I do wonder if there is scope for us to consider some of the valued aspects beyond the built form, and ways in which we might sort of look to value those going forward.
If I may come back on that, the reason why I referenced ponds in relation to Headcorn and Staplehurst is that we did win appeals back on the old local plan in relation to attempts to fill in ponds in front gardens that were seen to have a streetscape and kind of cultural relevance. And I am interested that trees are referenced in the document, but I think on the low Weald, I think ponds are they are a kind of key historic and cultural feature, and I think we do need to think a little bit about that going forward. And indeed, I remember if you go to Sainsbury's in Headcorn, there is a pond in the middle of the car park, and that was one of the successful battles where they could build their car park, but they couldn't get rid of the pond. And you know, the only good thing about going to Sainsbury's and Headcorn is watching the great crested newts in the pond in the car parks. And
Thank you. Councillor Harper proposed it. Is there a seconder? Thank you. So do we all agree? Thank you very much. I now declare this meeting closed. Thank you all very much for your contributions and have a safe journey back.